So hi everybody, as said, I'm Kat. I've been at Ord Gateway for 7 years now, and internal communications has been my role for the last 3 years. I think even as an industry on a whole, I've just seen it change so much, and there's so many exciting things happening today. I'm upstairs talking all about it to anybody that's coming up to the comms stand. Today, I wanted to tell you a little story. I'm not going to do a presentation with a keynote as such traditional way, as the theme is rebelling. I thought I'd read you all a fairy tale. So I just want you to think and remember for a moment being tucked up in bed at night, listening to your favourite bedtime stories, how they spark your imagination and let your dreams run wild. So, while I say it's a fairy tale, but actually it's a story for everybody, especially those in this room, because it's everybody who wants to make the world a better place to work and absolutely rid it of those mundane corporate communications that really drive us all berserk. So, if you're sitting comfortably, I shall begin. Once upon a time, there was a little unicorn who lived in the beautiful kingdom of culture. Now, they were a happy little unicorn with many magical traits. The excited butterflies which lived in her tummy always fluttered whenever she had news to share. And as she darted around the kingdom, telling all the different creatures the kingdom tales of the great news, and sometimes there is bad, the magnificent mane would shine with all her positive powers. Now, a little birdie told her about a dark place, the disengagement danger zone. It was very dark there, very dark indeed. When it rained, it poured, and the floor, it was sodden in secrets. A complete muddy mess, said the bird. Unlike our open and honest kingdom, there's a dark, demonic intranet overlord, and he's got immense power, and he fires out so many murmurs, messages, and so many monstrous documents, no one can hear a thing. Just big booms and bangs from his office all day long. Little Bird told the unicorn of the danger zone's ancient towers of technology, where everything was locked up. Made of clunky old rusting metal, the towers creaked under the weight of everything locked inside. They stored everything, including all the secrets of how to get to the bridge that crossed the river to the kingdom of culture. Well, I must go help, said the unicorn, and off they went. Hours later, they entered the danger zone. The frosty, whispering winds spiraled around the trunks of the giant, overbearing trees, and the words got lost on the frost that covered the leaves. They had been there a very, very, very long time. They were the Boredom Trees, with branches covered in long-service leaves. Tradition had made them sturdy and strong, but a deep rot of distance was starting to set in. "Hello, Boredom Trees," she shouted. "I know you've been doing your best to protect them, with your long-service leaves soaking up the worst of the rain and talking about things while it seems like a pain, but sharing the rain, whether it's good or bad, will make magic happen. I know it sounds mad, but here on the floor, things are trying to grow. Flowers will bloom if you just let them know. Open your branches and let them see. All the way to the top, you need transparency." Next, the night shift owl. "Are you new? I hadn't heard anything, but then everyone's asleep by the time I come in." He twirled his head and stretched his wings, and the unicorn spotted a pocket, one with a phone, one with a tablet, and other pockets filled with all sorts of gadgets. "I've got it. I know what you can use to keep up with all your daily news. I bet I'll make you say a happy twit-twoo. We'll brace technology. It's so easy to do." The owl looked ecstatic and said, "Woohoo!" So on she continued on the muddy path, with the whispering winds slowing to draughts. The sky was now clearer. You could see a North Star. It gave them direction instead of no insight and showed them the way, shining super bright. Deep as she went, just a little bit further, some negative words, another murmur. "Hello? Who are you? I can't see your face." "I'm hiding over here. I can't stand this place. Everything we do is such a disgrace. I'm always left here to wallow in mud, and if I try and climb higher, I fall with a thud. Now, not long ago, the squirrel had colour, A bright red coat, so shiny and vibrant, but years in the dark and the colour had gone. He was cynical now and full of fear. All the acorns that he'd gathered over the years he kept for himself. In fact, he had gathered quite a mighty nut wealth. Why would you do that? Can't you see? If you share your acorns, they'll grow into trees. You've got so much knowledge and we can share it together. You'll grow trees of your own and climb them forever. The squirrel took on longer to take on board this new way of thinking and thought of sharing his hoard. I know a place where acorns can grow. It's the kingdom of culture. Come on, let's go. Along the unicorn went with the squirrel in tow. He wasn't really interested in work, so he decided to go. He took her on the tour of the places he'd been, and he told her the stories of the horrors he'd seen. It really wasn't his fault he'd grown cynical and sad. You probably would be too if you'd been treated so bad. Now onto the pond, they went for a drink, and swimming in the water, they saw a big fish. The unicorn asked, "Do you like it here?" "I bloody wish. I used to love swimming. It was my favourite thing. But over time, it's got really, really grim. All of the water used to be crystal clear, and now all us fish just live in fear. It's nothing like the pond that we were once promised. Everything's dark and seems dishonest. Now I'll make you better. I promise you this. We'll clean up the water and make you happy fish." On the floor, they saw a carpet of mushrooms, every single one white and red, toxic and full of office politics dread. A mouse spoke up as they walked through them all. "These are what I've been having for my tea, and I thought that they were going to satisfy me, but their taste bitter, horrid, and not very nice. Is there anywhere tasty for us little mice?" "You need something nice and delicious. Don't eat the mushrooms, they sound vicious." The unicorn knew the importance of feeding the creatures the food they were really needing. Now into the clearing where the bored trees had parted, there it was, standing tall, the towers they'd heard of. It creaked and it groaned under so much weight, all locked inside through an inaccessible gate. On the floor, all around, where the sunshine had hit, little flowers were growing on every bit. They blossomed and grew towards the sky, so much colour and beauty, no wondering why. The whispering winds had stopped and now focused. The wilderness grew any flower, a rose, a daisy, even a crocus. Now there was a bang and a really loud roar, and the creatures all scattered across the floor. "What's this sunshine doing here in my place?" The intralette overlord stomped in. "What a disgrace." He growled and shouted, "Why all these flowers growing everywhere? Don't you know I get my strength from work, wilderness, despair? This is my place. What's it got to do with you?" He stared at the unicorn, and she smiled right back. "Don't be angry or sad. I'm here to help. I don't want to upset you, but come on, or make you mad, but this space must be making you sad. Or give us a key to all of your towers. They'll no longer creak, and you won't waste hours searching for things they could easily find. If you just made it simple, you'd save so much time." "A key for the towers? There's not one for you." "Well, what about me?" said the squirrel by her side. "And me," said the bored trees, who had their eyes open wide. "And us," said the mice. "And us," said the owls as they swooped from above. All of the creatures began to speak up. He saw how the sun was creating clarity of thought and how all the creatures were a lot less fraught. Around they gathered and everyone cheered. "Give us the key, we've been waiting for years." The unicorn was pleased. She could see where this was going. "Well, it won't take too much toing and froing. Go to the bridge that crosses the river and I'll show you in my kingdom how much more you can deliver to all of the creatures here on the ground. It'll be great. No more frowns. I promise you this. There's steps you can follow for every wish. I'll help you get there. I've got lots of other tricks. You'll build a kingdom and I'll give you bricks." Now in place of a cloak and dagger attire, a mane appeared, then a horn, then a tail, and a sparkly hooves, rainbows beamed down, and the creatures sang like a choir. What could be happening in this wondrous hour? Well, it's a whole new me, the Overlord declared with absolute glee. He pranced around happy with his new way of thinking, and the creatures all celebrated with tons of cheers and drinking. The unicorn had used her tail to give a big push to all the things they'd wanted to see. A better place for all, a better place to be. So that's the end of my little fairy tale. It's a little short version that I've just done today. And I'm going to tell you now, like, all the different things really that the unicorn teaches us. There's a lot of metaphors in there, but it pretty much summarizes a lot of the things that I've learned really in working in internal communications. First of all, so see the cynical squirrel, it's actually based on a friend that I used to work with a very, very long time ago. It's those times, when you're not focused on open and honest communications. We've talked about how it's the main part of the bridge that gets you to that kingdom of culture and crosses that gap that we all need to do. Cynical people, how does it happen? It's, from a friend at the time, it was just being told over and over again things that were going to happen, and they just never materialized. Really appeasing people rather than being realistic with them and setting their expectations. I think another example of it, a book that I read when I first started in comms was by Roger de Affrey. It's called The Credible Company, and it taught me so much. Like, the first chapter opens with such a powerful story about open and honest communications. It goes back to 1981, and it talks about Xerox, tech company at the time, like printing, photography, all of that sort of thing. And the industry was really changing for them, and it meant that their workforce was going to have to really downsize. They took their workforce and decided, do you know what, let's just not mention this, let's just carry on, business as normal, and just pretend like nothing's happening and just ignore it and the problem will go away. And people will be made redundant, but we'll deal with it when it comes to it. That didn't happen. Unfortunately, the story got out to the press, and all of the employees found out they were losing their jobs in the newspapers at breakfast with their family sat around. So they went from being, I had to make a note of it because I'm not good at remembering numbers, it was £1.5 billion profit in 1981. In 1982, they dropped to 614 million. It's like 50% down. It was meant to be something that would boost their company, not cut it in half. So that really struck me when I started out in internal comms. On the flip side of that, I know MG Rover in the Build It book, and we went through the same actually at Reward Gateway, where we moved our help desk from London, our old office in Westbourne Grove. We had to move it. We were getting bigger, moved it over to Bulgaria, and we also had to tell the UK team that the roles were going to be no more. So unlike the example I've just shared, we decided to do that with, I think it was about 9 to 12 months warning. We kept it very, very open, gave them all the information about why this was happening, and as much advance warning as possible so they could get used to the idea of change. You're always going to have people in your company who are early adopters and can just get on board with things right away. But with such a big shift, like getting a new job, people need a lot of time to take that in, talk to their friends, family about it, understand, it is a life change, but it's going to be okay. And giving them as much advance warning as possible is fine. The people that were fearing it, actually, it wasn't the employees that should be feared. It should be the lack of not telling them anything, because that's when office gossip and the mushrooms start to pop up, those office politics and all those things. So in the situation with Reward Gateway, we moved, went to Bulgaria. Everybody had left, they were fine, went on to do new jobs. We had some hiccups in getting Bulgaria set up with the office thing, so we had to open again in the UK. I think it was 2 months later. The nicest thing about having taken them on that whole journey with us is that they were advocates for the company. The people that had been on the help desk actually came back to work with us for another, I think it was 1, 2, or maybe 3 months, and then they were happy to go again. But because they understood and they felt a connection to the journey that the company was going on, they were happy to support it. So that's why I put one of the biggest lessons from the book and the unicorn is open and honest communication being the foundation of employee engagement, because it's all about trust. Next up, so I guess avoiding muddle mud. It must really be manager-led with the communication. So it's taken us a while to find our sort of like pattern of communications, I suppose. Like Masgroves here taught me about a constant thread of comms, and they'll tell you about a golden thread, yeah. And finally, like we've kind of nailed it now. Every Monday, it's been really popular. We start with Mission Mondays. They're from our CEO, so Doug has access to the editing platform. He does it either Friday or sometimes it's on Sunday evening. He goes on and just reflects back on the last week, talks about things that are coming up in the future and the challenges, but he sets the tone for the week. Everybody can go on there, everybody can comment. I think I've actually got an look at this, it's like an example of it here. So you can see how many people in the company are looking at it. He can see how they're responding to it, the different reactions that are happening. And it doesn't matter where Doug is in the world. He could be at his home in San Francisco or in any of our offices. Everybody has the same access to Doug, regardless of where you are in the company. And it's nice that he can go back and have conversations with people. And it's cool. It gets pushed out onto, we're testing our new Connect Plus app inside. I don't know if you've seen that, but notifications and all sorts. And people can request to follow, so it'll drop into their inbox too if they prefer email. So yeah, I would say, just like we talk about recognition upstairs being manager-led, it's the same method with comms. Like if you really want to get people on board and set the tone for it, Mission Mondays is where it's at. Technology. So there's only me in the comms team at Reward Gateway, and I speak to so many different people that look after comms as well, and I know it's the same situation in a lot of businesses. Or perhaps you don't even have a comms person and it's put onto the HR team to look after. This has been like a new piece for me. It's a bit of a new world, but we're finding is this whole new world of integrations, which is just such a time saver for me. Particular favorites on this board is our integration with Slack. So every piece of comms, once I've done the content and it's there, it's just pushing out onto our platforms instantly. So for us, we use Slack as our internal quick messenger system between employees. And we have a general channel, so everybody gets the notification at the same time on their phones. It's not going into like people's inboxes and sinking down to the bottom. It's not, if you've got an even bigger company, I know like the chance of sending a newsletter out and it might go in spam or anything like that. This pushes right out to Slack and people can follow it there. Nice little signposts. Also, really great RSS feeds. So what you've just seen on that last slide with the blogs is that they'll then rejig to show on our internal signage in the offices. So sorts of self all out, just like the feed you see on the wow wall. If any of you have got that social recognition wall, it just populates itself, which is really important with both comms and recognition, is you want to make it very visible in the office. People's attention, like they might have read it once, but getting it into their heads, getting it visible like 3-7 times or so throughout the day to remind them, really gets the message in there. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm like super technical or anything like that. There's some things on this board that I don't know what they are, like the SMAL, but if they interest you, there's people upstairs that can help. So I talked also about the North Star, and it's one of the key communication values that really drives business growth. Glenn was upstairs talking earlier about like values in the business, and he's a communications person that really puts values at the heart of everything that he does at Misguided. It's the same really at Reward Gateway as well. I always consider, well, how does this really match against our 8 values? So for us as a tech company, and probably the same in many other businesses, our North Star that we talk about is actually our DPMO. So that means defects per million orders, right? If anybody's calling our help desk or contacting us about a bug in a system or anything like that, that's something that shouldn't have really happened to our customers. But like DPMO, our team know that more from social media, like don't piss me off, which kind of means the same thing actually. But we've connected it to one of our main values, which is delight our customer, which is much more relatable to non-techie people. Like defects per million order is like, don't want to hear it. Delight our customer is much more like softer language that's accessible for everybody and makes it really, really clear to understand what our North Star is, but also gives us that metric that drives growth of the business. This then goes into our comms, so we can thread it through to say thank you to people. Every Thursday we host a Thank You Thursday day, which is managers talking about how you've helped contribute towards the journey towards our North Star and really, really delivering like excellence in delighting our customers. So yeah, that's the North Star in the story. Next, you must feed them the same knowledge you've had if you want your people to grow with you. I am somebody who's really, before internal comms, my role was actually knowledge base. And building that before doing comms was a real lesson to me in just how important it is to have your question and answers, like technical support, all material just there for people to be able to answer it themselves. You never want to be the comms person who becomes like the post leader, I suppose, like delivering the messages. You want to be able to coach people and to be able to communicate themselves. And that means like sharing with people in the company about taking people on the journey. One change in the business, if you're just doing one blog post about it and expect everybody to grasp it right away, it's simply not going to happen. You need to take them from A to B and give them all the information that you've had as well to get them to arrive at the same destination as you. It's all about, I suppose, the same thing, like being as open with your people as early as you can and being as honest with them as you can as well. That's when you start to see the flowers really grow in your company and people start to develop. So a really good example of this is one of the biggest changes that we went through was a change from Glenn Elliott being our CEO, taking the role of founder, and Doug Butler settling in. I suppose we could have just done it through one blog post and been like, this is what's happened, and see how that went down. But what we decided to do was, really take people through that change transition and share with them all the reasons that the leadership team and Glenn himself had decided to put Doug at the heart of it now. So there's the blog piece there that's written down for everybody who wants to follow that. But we then went through with a week of live interviews happening with the different people on the leadership team. And it wasn't me doing the interviews. We picked different influencers from the company that would be asking their own questions generated by employees. We had an open question box so everybody in the company could submit them through. And it was a full week, like every day to suit each of our different time zones, making the experience the same for all of the employees. Now, if any of you've met Glenn Elliott before, he's a really, really big character. So it was kind of thinking, what's it going to be like? Doug describes himself as the Eeyore to Glenn's Tigger, so that tells you how different they are as personalities. The funny thing was, there wasn't actually any change in productivity. There wasn't any impact on our profit, anything like that at all. It was pretty much business as usual because everybody had been introduced to Doug in exactly the same way as the whole of the leadership team had. So it's my bit on taking people on the journey. We go on to creating the community. This has been really, really great. I mentioned before about not being the post lady, not being the person that's like, I've got something to share, can you write it for me? Can you get that done? It doesn't work like that. If it was constantly my voice that people were hearing, it would start to get very, very boring on Boom for sure. So what we have got is all different people from the company, and although I am internal comms like lead on this, you'll notice as we just go through this in the last week, Sevi, Laz, Plemena, I've got Gemma Matthews, who's back somewhere, Doug himself, Rob Hicks as well. I rarely feature. It's not my voice. There's no point in me being the author of product or anything like that. I've coached all these people to find their tone, find their confidence in speaking to the business, and be the ones that deliver the message. So it's coming from the faces that reflect that area of the company rather than in some random tone or random understanding that I've got. And it makes it really, really inclusive and much more reflective of the whole business that way too. The nice thing that we've got as well is that anybody that's interested in these people can now just follow that blog or get notifications if they want whenever Doug posts anything. I follow everybody, so my notification box is always full. But yeah, it should never just be like the internal comms person's voice. They should be more of a coaching role, I suppose, for the rest of the business. So that's everything from me. If you've got any more questions or you'd like the full version of the book, do come upstairs and get it. Yeah, I'll see you up there. Thank you.